Welcome to the latest installment of the Run to Daylight podcast. I'm your host, Todd Burrows. You can find me at Best Ball NFL on Twitter. And with me today is Dave Kluge of Football Guys. You learn something new every day, or at least you strive to learn something new every day. And I found out that his name isn't Kluge. You ever watch Seinfeld, like the old Newman?
Yes,
I could, I
not
could
religiously,
totally,
but
I could totally see someone seeing one of your tweets and going, "Kluge."
oh,
Um,
all the time.
anyway, we're going to get into that. We are going to do a deep dive into Dave, his life, how he got to where he is, some of the more controversial things that have happened to him, and some, we're going to frankly, as you would expect from me, ask the questions and let Dave talk. And one thing, I've really come around on Dave because I found that he has a sense of humor about himself and doesn't take himself too seriously, which is why I thought interviewing him would be a ton of fun. We would get to know each other, and everyone would get a better chance at getting to know him. I do want to mention my friends over at the FFPC. The FFPC, go to my FFPC, and if you've never played on the FFPC and you want a $25 coupon to try and compete with someone like me, no, just kidding. Just use Best Ball as at the checkout. Sign up for a league, use Best Ball at the checkout, save $25, and they'll know that I'm not totally ineffectual as a podcaster. They also are put $1 million up top this year for the main event. Teams are up to $2,000. And right now, if you are like Dave Kluge and you like Dynasty, right now is the time where you can adopt an orphan at the FFPC. Discounted teams available, leagues from $77 all the way up to $2,500. I really like how they cut down to 16 before the draft. So it makes getting an orphan, if you really think you're good, there are a lot of teams. Go to myffpc.com and find one. Dave, that was a long way to come and say hello. Welcome to the show.
Well, thanks a lot for having me, Todd. Looking forward to getting to know you a little bit and letting your audience get to know me a little bit as well.
That's great. So obviously, if we look behind you, we realize that you are a Lamar Jackson fan.
A
You
very
are
big
a
Lamar Jackson
Chicago
fan.
Bear fan.
Big Bears fan.
And you're an Emily Kluge fan.
Of course. And what you probably can't see because it's very small up here is my Ken Griffey Jr. bat as well. Not much of a baseball fan anymore, but growing up, I was a huge baseball fan. Ken Griffey Jr. was my favorite. So, just don't really have time to invest into baseball anymore. But yeah, just been a
I made
diehard
that
sports
call
fan
right
my whole
after I
life.
got into fantasy football.
Yeah.
Right after I had been, and then I sealed the deal when I got married. I made a deal with my ex. This is about 2004. I said, "You let me have every Sunday for fantasy to watch games from morning till night. I'll give up other sports, and I just need those 20 weeks a year." And to her credit, one of the few things she did keep her word on was letting me have my Sundays.
Absolutely love that. My mom tells the story that when she got married, her first time, my grandpa walked her down the aisle, and as he was handing my mom over to her first husband, said, "Just remember, Sundays are for football." So I don't think I ever really had a choice. It was in my blood that I was just born to be a football fan.
My mom she's still alive. She is a huge football fan. And growing up, I mean, I was born in 1962. If you hadn't noticed, I'm not young. And I remember back in those days, you only got to watch your teams like every other week because they had blackouts. And in those days, even if the games had sold out, they wouldn't show the games. The Giants were
Really?
sold out for like 30 years. And until sometime in the 70s, they relaxed the rule to where the blackout would be lifted if the game was sold out by Friday night or something. So my mom, I remember sitting on Sundays listening to the radio, listening to the Giants, and I'll never forget. Even back then, I said, "Oh, the Giants won. They're really good." And she goes, "Wait till next week. They're playing the Cowboys."
Uh-oh.
So, so tell me a little bit about yourself, other than the fact that you were a baseball fan, Ken Griffey. Where did you grow up? To kind of just give us a little bit of a background on you and all the non-football stuff that led up until yeah,
Yeah.
I already said it.
Of course, yeah. So I was born just outside of Chicago. Lived there pretty much my whole life. Southwest suburbs, which I've noticed that a lot of people in the fantasy football industry are from Chicago. We can talk about that a little bit, but I think it has something to do with the Bears being such a bad franchise that people start shifting their focus from football to fantasy football. But either way, grew up outside of Chicago. When I was about 19 years old, I moved into the city. Spent my time there 9 years living in the city, and that's where I met my lovely wife Emily. We spent about 5 years together in Chicago, and then just a little over 3 years ago, actually, we decided, Chicago's great, but we've been here for a long time, packed up and moved out to Colorado.
Yeah,
Career wise, I've been in sales my entire life. When I was a freshman in college, I was recruited to do financial sales services for Prudential and started making pretty good money doing that as a 19, 20-year-old kid. And I said, what's the point of staying in school if I can just chase after what I'm doing as a salesman, and then just kind of bounced around from different corporate sales jobs. And that's when I started doing fantasy football writing, was on the side in the evenings when I was working a sales job. And then after doing it kind of part-time for a few years, just quit my job and dove headfirst into the industry about 2 years ago. Gave myself a 3-year plan to try to, figure it out and make it full time in the industry.
and you did.
I did, yeah.
Well,
I'm
and
proud
you
to say
sell.
it. Yeah.
I know you're marketing director, so obviously, well, first of all, I was in sales for almost 30 years. I was a sales rep in the luggage business, and I would sell to everyone from Macy's to the mom and pop store. So I have a pretty extensive sales background myself, and I never did much marketing. I was kind of the grinder. I was, very similar to my fantasy style. I especially when I was younger, I'd outwork you.
Mhm.
Now, I'm ready for bed as soon as this podcast ends. Uh, but but that's cool. And so, uh, I wanted to talk about the sales thing a little more. Uh, what about that has helped you in fantasy?
Well, in fantasy, I don't know if it helps me as a fantasy player, but it definitely did help me in the fantasy industry. Much like you, Todd, just working hard. That's something that has been ingrained in me. I'm so thankful to my parents for just instilling a very strong work ethic with me. And, sales, that's kind of what it is. Anybody can do it. You learn how to be personable, you learn how to sell the product that you're selling. But really, at the end of the day, what it comes
I
down to is,
disagree. I think real
oh,
salespeople are born and
all right.
not. You can take a guy who's not a salesman and and you can teach him certain things, but that natural ability to deal with people, to see people, to have empathy for people. People
Mhm.
underestimate how much empathy plays into your ability to sell because it's especially as you move on, you realize it's not about you saying the right words. It's about you making the person you're trying to sell feel a certain way.
Yeah, I agree with
And
that.
part of
The
that is listening and being empathetic.
Right, and I think, maybe for me, it just feels a little natural because it's something that has come naturally to me. My parents, grandparents,
Well,
aunts, uncles, I mean,
you're a born salesman, right? You don't mind talking. Other
right.
people would rather, stick one of your wife's hot pies in their face than talk in front of people and try and convince them of things.
Right, and for me, it came naturally, maybe that's what I was getting at. Not anybody can be a salesman, but you know how it is. When you're working in sales, the amount of effort that you put in is the amount of, income that you're going to get out of it. And that was always my thing is, I'm sure that there are people out there that are smarter than me, whatever it may be, but I will outwork everybody. And that's the mindset I've had since I was a teenager at any job that I've had. And then I'd say that that carried over into the fantasy industry. I was kind of putzing
What do you
around, doing it
what
on
do
the
you, what do
side.
you think? Sorry to interrupt, but what
No.
do you think? I'm always curious about the inner fire that people have, right? Like, what is it? Like I know for me, I wasn't really accepted when I was younger. So that burning desire to be competitive a lot of the times was to beat the people who underestimated me, right? And seeing ourselves and knowing the good and bad about ourselves. I was just curious, what do you think it was that gave you, because anyone can say, oh, I have this burning desire to outwork people, but I'm curious as to what made you tick and get to that point.
Without getting too personal here, for me, it was financial independence. Growing up, I bounced around a lot. With a mother that had some multiple marriages and lived in a lot of different houses, moving from town to town. So for me, as soon as I got the ability to be financially independent, that was the driving force for me. Is just being able to live on
And
my
having
own,
some
not have to rely
control
on
over
anybody
your
else.
situation.
100%, yes.
Right. And, see, man, I'm glad I asked that question because, we talk about getting to know each other, but that's the real stuff, right?
hmm
Um,
Like I told you, I'm an open book. I've done some shows in the past that aren't football related, and I think these are some of the best shows. We always see, AJ Dillon is going to be great this year, and blah blah blah, and we have those conversations. Everyone knows the takes, but I really like the shows like this where we get to kind of take the mask off a little bit and get to know the person rather than just how they feel about football. I don't share a lot of personal stuff on my Twitter, and that's a very conscious choice. But when I'm invited to open up and talk to somebody, I'm more than happy to.
yeah, which is one of the things, like I said, right? You can have a first impression of someone, but I think underneath it all, I'm a big softy, and I want people to do well. And, I saw how you handled certain criticism and me busting your chops. I mean, frankly, I'm really good at it, and I took some shots, and Twitter shots. It wasn't like I was completely mean, but you engaged me, right? Like where a lot of people just would have gotten angry and or blocked me. Although I don't get blocked um, very often, but unless it's for my political takes. But I, I really was impressed, and that's why why I wanted to interview you. That you are an open book in the fact that you sit there and if you do something, you sit there and you explain why, and you listen to people with an open heart about what they don't like, and that was something that I admired.
Well, thank you very much, Dad. I appreciate that. And, you know, when I was brand new to Twitter, and not when I was brand new, I mean, when I was brand new, I was just engaging
Like a
with
little
everybody.
bird.
Pretty much, exactly.
Yeah.
And then it got to the point where my platform got a little bit bigger and I started, getting input from people that were outside of my initial circle. And it did scare me a little bit at first. My platform grew much faster than I ever expected it to. I've only been on Twitter for about a year and a half now. And it was,
Wow.
frankly, kind of scary when people started, chirping at me, people that I hadn't seen before, and, troll accounts making fun of me started popping up. And I didn't really know how to react. So my
I
initial
never did
reaction to
that.
what was that?
I never did that.
All right, well, thank you. I'm glad,
Yeah,
but
no,
there
I've
there were
never
lots
trolled
of
anyone.
yeah, and there were lots of people that from burner accounts, fake accounts, whatever it may be, and it scared me. It really did. So my initial reaction was block everybody that is coming at me negatively. And then I just realized after doing that for a couple of months that I was just selling myself short by, just cutting out people that could be potential followers, could be potential fans, subscribers, whatever it may be. So about 6 months ago, I went through and I unblocked everybody. People that have said terrible things to me, people that have come after my wife, people that have just, have every reason to be blocked. I unblocked them. And I just said, you know what, there's no reason to close out anybody. When you have these interactions with people, most of the times it's limited to 1 2 3 back and forth 280 characters. I don't think you really get an accurate representation of who the person is from those short interactions. And somebody could have been having a bad day when they took a shot at me, and then I blocked them, and then they had a different opinion of me. So, when people come at me, I do like to engage with them a little bit and ask them, hey, why are you doing this? And just trying to figure out why. I just, there's so many people that fight fire with fire or will just close off any sort of negativity. And I'm a pretty open person, and I like having conversations with people that like me and people that don't like me.
Yeah. So, moving on a little bit, the football guys. How did the gig come about, and what exactly are you responsible for? Give us kind of like an average. A lot of people want to get a full time job in the industry. Why don't you take us through, how the gig came about and what an average day for Dave Kluge is working for Fantasy Pros?
Well, football guys. I left Fantasy Pros a few months
Oh
ago,
my
so
gosh,
exclusively
I
over at
knew
football
that.
guys now.
I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know why I did that. I
don't worry
know
about
you
it.
with football guys because of
Yes,
Joe Bryant. You already mentioned him.
right. And
Uh,
I started playing fantasy football when I was a teenager, and when I was a teenager,
I had Fantasy Pros on my head because Matthew Friedman
uh,
and Derek Brown just went. It's like they're hiring. So I had.
you're the
I
hot name right now.
apologize.
No, don't
Go
don't
ahead.
worry about it. And that is where I started. I worked at Fantasy Pros for 3 years, and they did great stuff over there for me. Really helped me launch my career. But, when I got into fantasy football, you had ESPN, CBS, NFL that were given their takes, but I said, I wanna get off of the platform that I'm playing football and try to get some other information, and the 2 websites that I came across were fftoday.com and footballguys.com, which are both still around, and for whatever reason, I just really took to Football Guys. So when I was about 15 years old, that's when I started getting these emails from Joe Bryant to my inbox every single day, and when I got into the industry, I wrote a short list of companies that I wanted to work with, and one of them was Football Guys. So I invited Joe Bryan on my show, and we didn't talk any football at all. We talked about what it was like to start a website back in the 2000s, how they went from a
I remember when
magazine.
they started. I used to be on a website called Ant Sports, which had mock drafts,
Mhm.
and there was pre best ball, and it was yeah, football. I remember them back then.
Yeah, and Football Guys is just a company that I really wanted to work with. So, well, I'll just go off on a little bit of a tangent here, but I'm sure you saw recently the drama
Please do.
about how sports writers deserve to be compensated for their work. And in theory, I completely understand that. But me, when I decided that I wanted to get into the industry, I emailed every website out there offering to write for free. And I said, I want the experience, I want the exposure, I want the mentorship, I want to learn how to do this. And, Joe,
Back to that motivation that you talked about.
right, and for me, I knew what most small websites were paying, $5 to $20 an article. I said, that's not going to make any sort of substantial difference in my life, but what will make a difference is getting mentorship from people that I really respect. So I reached out to Joe Bryant. We formed a little bit of a connection, emailed back and forth, and I just persistently, he wasn't even responding to my emails. I was sending him every show I was doing and article that I was writing and asking him, can I please get an opportunity? Please get an opportunity. And then eventually I invited him
Is
on my
that
show.
also how you got married?
That was a little bit easier
We're
going.
going to get to that. I want to
Yeah,
get to that
yeah,
separately. Keep
yeah.
going with the football guys stuff. But
So, so,
I couldn't resist the opportunity to get the joke in.
Joe and I eventually he came on my show. We connected through that show, just chopping it up for an hour, talking about the business of football guys, talking about fantasy football, and then just about 2 months later, he said, "Hey, I want to bring you on staff." And what that entailed at the time was, writing an article here or there, doing a video here and there, and again, I just persistently kept asking Joe, "Hey, what else can I do here? What else can I do here?" Pitching him some different ideas, and then just turn that from a content creator job to a full-time job. And that's the first advice that I give anybody that's trying to make it full-time in this industry. There are a lot of really, really good content creators out there. I mean, there are thousands of people that are writing great articles, tweeting very actionable advice, doing great on podcasts and whatever it may be. But I think in order to separate yourself, the best thing to do is find secondary and tertiary skills that can be of value because there are just so many people out there that can create good content. And the way that I was able to set myself apart a little bit was using my background in sales and search engine optimization and things like that, which, Joe eventually found valuable enough to offer me a job.
Yeah, I mean, I when I got out of sales, I bought a carpet cleaning business. So SEO became very important to me. I just got Google guaranteed. So that's like, anyway.
Awesome.
So all right, and again, but see, now we're starting to form a picture of you. Like one of the things, like when you put yourself out there, and I have the same kind of issue, but in a different way. There's going to be people who love you, and there's going to be people who hate you, right? But because not everyone has it in them to just be that guy who hounds people until they give them a job. And obviously there's more than that. You were willing to work for free, you were willing to prove yourself, but that ability, and in sales a lot of times, we always taught, if you don't do anything else, ask for the sale,
Yep.
right? And if you do everything else and you don't ask for the sale, you haven't done your job.
Mm-hmm.
So I see how I now see why you were good at sales, and why that you mix that persistence with that willingness to ask for the sale and opportunity, because people will give you opportunities for a variety of reasons, and sometimes it's just let me at least see what this guy has, and I'll get him off my back, and he'll get a chance. And if he's not good, then I'll fire him.
And
But
one of my favorite lines when I was in sales, because you know how it is, you show up to places and the person that you want to talk to is in back and he's busy, or you call on the phone and the secretary won't connect you with the person that you need to talk to. And I would just relentlessly leave voicemails, keep showing up, whatever it may be. And a lot of the times, that first contact that I would have with a potential customer was them rolling their eyes and going, "Oh my God, it's you again." And my response was always, "You'll learn to love me eventually. My charm is in my persistence." And, typically that would turn it into a sale, but so many people are just
yeah,
afraid
there's a
of
lot of
rejection.
different
They
ways
don't
to
want to
earn
hear no.
accounts. There's a lot of different ways to earn accounts, um, to buy into you, and
Mhm,
that's certainly one of them,
mhm.
right?
Just be that annoying gnat that just doesn't go away.
People admire it, because not everyone can do it. All right, so what is being Kluge, and does Pfizer or Moderna make a vaccine for it?
I couldn't even give you it's kind of an abstract. It just kind of took on this life of its own. Are you familiar with the Open Bar podcast with uh who is it? Gabe FF Man Bun. It's hosted over on
I
DLF.
know, I know FF Man Bun, but I never listened to the show.
Well,
I'm terrible. I don't listen to a ton of stuff. To me, it's a fine balance between my own thoughts and what I intake,
mhm.
and it's nothing against anybody. Like I'm partners with Billy Musio, and I love his work, and I almost never listen to his show.
I'm the same way. I mean, I don't like broadcasting it, but I don't like consuming too much content because I feel like it clouds my judgment. I like coming
Correct.
to my own thoughts, so I try not
Correct.
to. But I ended
If
up
you
on the
think
show.
you're good at fantasy football, right? You do need help. All of us have
Right.
biases, and we need help. But if it's I always used to say I've never um whenever I've drafted a team that I don't like, I can't ever remember winning with it. But
Yep.
most of the time when I draft a team and at the end I go, man, that's a good team, and that points to your gut. And what we're talking about here is, and everyone's different. See, that's the thing people don't realize, whether in sales or in life. You might be the kind of guy, whoever's listening to this, that needs to hear content. It's just your favorite thing in the world. You want to hear everyone's opinion, and you can take that and make a nice pie out of it. um Me, I need my ingredients to be like 50, 60, 70%, and then 30% just checking my work with other
Exactly.
people.
Yeah, and that's where I am. And there have been times where I've been accused. I'll tweet a takeout, and somebody's like, "Oh, you stole this from the fantasy footballers," and I don't know how to politely say, "I didn't listen to that show. This is a natural thought that came to me," but it happens often where I've been accused of stealing takes, and I don't consume that much content.
Yeah, yeah. So you came to my attention first with the whole calling the Philly police thing. And now that I've gotten to know you a little bit, this whole thing, like I could see it. I can see it now. It got in your head, and you were like, and what next thing you know, you're on the phone with the Philly police. Why don't you explain to us what happened, why you did it, and what came out of it?
So I realized that I may have overstepped a little bit, or not overstep, but stepped slightly out of my lane. And in hindsight, I realized that. As I think that you have, learned from this conversation that we've had so far, I'm an ambitious person, and I think that my ambition was a little bit misguided on that day. But what had happened is this story started popping up on Reddit a few days before it ever hit Twitter. So I was paying very close attention to this story as it was developing on Reddit. And I
Um,
was
at least mention what the story was.
the story was that DeAndre Swift was being implicated for a murder that happened in Philadelphia. And so I'm watching this, and there's posts that are coming up on Reddit, and then they're getting deleted by the moderators. And I'm searching everywhere, and I can't find anybody talking about this. I had the DeAndre Swift saved in my searches on Twitter, and every hour I'm checking, waiting, when is this story going to hit Twitter? When is this story going to hit Twitter? So I called the police well before I ever tweeted this out. I called the police, and I, did my due diligence and said, "Hey, what's going on?" And like you and I have, you know, come to learn about each other, I have a big history in phone sales. So getting past gatekeepers, pulling information from people is something that just kind of comes naturally to me. So, I used a lot of the stuff that I learned throughout my career in phone sales, got through to an officer in the commissioner's department, and for whatever reason, he was very open with me. And I I don't know why he was open with me the way that he was,
So
but
I got another piece of the puzzle. The next piece of the puzzle is one of the things you know how like a dog will get a treat when he does certain things.
mhm,
Inwardly, you get a treat when you're able to navigate through and get through those gatekeepers and get to your target. Just getting there is what turns you on, and then whatever you can make out of it is even better. Am
right.
I right with that
I,
look
I
inside?
I'd agree with that. So I talked to this gentleman, and he's very open with me, and he says, "Yeah, we've heard about these rumors, we've seen them online, but no, I can assure you that there are no NFL players right now that are being implicated for murder." So I take my notes, get the officer's name, do everything that I'm supposed to, and then I sit on this information for it was about 4 or 5 hours because I didn't want to be the first person to tweet about this. So I'm sitting here waiting and waiting, and I keep searching DeAndre Swift, keep searching DeAndre Swift. And then Benjamin Albright tweeted something about it and said, "My sources at the Philadelphia Police Department are saying that there's nothing to be concerned of." So after Benjamin Albright tweeted it, then I followed it up. And he had done it in response to somebody that said, tweeted at Benjamin Albright and said, "Hey, do you have any information on this DeAndre Swift story?" He said, "My sources at the police station are saying that it is nothing." And then that's when I tweeted it out that, he was implicated for a murder, but he's not being investigated at this time. And what happened over the next 48 hours is not what I expected at all with that. I was hoping to put to rest rumors that had been swirling around for the last couple of hours, but it blew up and took a life of its own. In hindsight, what I wish I could have done was deleted that about 5 minutes after I tweeted it out. But, I'm getting calls from all these people, and my DMs are blowing up, and everyone is asking me what's going on. And then it got to the point that it was so big that I couldn't delete it. It was being reported on ESPN and NFL Network and Barstool, and everybody's talking about it. And I said, "Well, I can't delete this at this point because I was the first person to do this." So, like I said, I realized that my ambition was a little bit misguided, and I stepped out of line a little bit there. And I have vowed since then to stick to credited sources and my fantasy analysis on them. I will not be breaking news stories anymore after that.
See, I don't know that I agree with that, and I'll just give you my sense from sitting here now, right? Because when you're in a hurricane, all you can see is the hurricane, right?
Mhm.
And then afterwards, all you can see is the effect that the
The
hurricane
damage.
had on you.
Right.
right? But me sitting here listening to this now, and this wasn't that big of a deal. What you did wasn't that big of a deal, right? And and I think that, you know, I would hate to see you give up doing that. I would hate to see that be your takeaway. I'll just say that. And I was as big of critic of you at the time as anyone. I thought it was ridiculous that you did it. But what we're both doing here is being honest about who we are. And I can be like a 59-year-old grumpy ass old man, that does, like I know I should have more grace. I know my faith says I should have more grace. And a lot of times I do, but sometimes I don't. And anyway, so I don't think, I think it's just so in line with your personality, and that's why you did it. And I think the way it came off was that and in general, my impression of you, and you've admitted that you are very career conscious. I forget the word that we use, but I feel like everyone wants to get ahead. And everyone has different lines of what they're willing to do or not do. But that's based on who you are internally, right? And I don't like you can be someone who is very opportunistic, but still not be doing something to be opportunistic,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I believe you when you telling me this, that you weren't doing this to be, and I do remember you did wait until after someone else had posted about it. So I know I just said a lot of words. Why don't you just take what you want to take out of it?
Now, if I could just be completely blunt, since that's the type of conversation that we're having here, I had, I had a lot of people that disliked me, because I rose through the industry pretty quickly, and I didn't expect
I
to.
don't think it's that.
I I would.
I think that might be part of it. I mean, and again, we're just being honest, right?
Mhm.
And I think that people like me and other people who are on Twitter 24/7 studying football, we're a bit of football snobs, right? And your style is much closer to an ESPN and a mainstream style than the niche Twitter fantasy football style. And I think that, it doesn't, it's not as deep as some people's. And I think that is what tends to rub people the wrong way. But I do think, how many followers do you have now?
Uh, Around 16,000, I believe.
Right. And I've been doing this longer than you, and I can't get to 4. Right. So that's not, and that's not about you being aggressive and an engagement farmer and me not. I think it's more that, our kind of like top 3% fantasy football information is for a very narrow crowd. We talk over the average fantasy football fan.
Mhm.
I think a lot of what you get accused for engagement farming is just supplying your audience what they want.
I'd agree. Now I'm just gonna ask that, have you ever watched any of my shows or read any of my articles,
No,
or do you just know me through Twitter?
just through Twitter.
Now, I don't wanna pat myself on the back too hard here, but I like to think that I am a hell of an analyst as well. My articles
And you
are,
should.
and I consider my articles to be high quality. I think that the advice that I give to my viewers on my podcast and my shows is very high quality, but I also realize that, when you're on Twitter, I was writing for 3 years before I ever even got on Twitter, and I realized quickly that, it's not easy to get a following on Twitter, but I also realized that people want really short bits of information. When I first got on Twitter, I was trying to do very long threads and, really data-driven stuff, and it just wasn't picking up. And then once I just started tweeting out my takes, that's what got people to engage with me. And then typically what I do is if I tweet out a take, it's usually a day or two before an article comes out or a day or two before a video comes out. So I back up all of my stuff. I just don't see Twitter as the place to back up my takes. And I could, but it doesn't get the same level of engagement, and it's not what my followers want. They don't want to sit there and scroll through a 20 tweet thread reading why I feel the way I feel. They just want to know how I feel and what my take is. And
Oh
then
yeah,
if they disagree with
most
it, I can
people
direct
want
them to
bullet
an article.
points.
Exactly.
Most people want bullet points. They want, who should I play? My nightmare. Like if I got a fantasy football job, my nightmare would be start sit questions.
Yes.
Right? Because for me to feel comfortable telling someone who to start, I would need to know the rules. I would need to know what place they were in. I would need to know their opponent's lineup.
Yep.
For me to get you to feel good about giving someone who they should start, because they're going to come back at you if you pick the wrong one.
Yeah. So let me give you one example. I tweeted out last offseason. I said DK Metcalf isn't a wide receiver 1. He's a boomer bust wide receiver 2. And people were livid, absolutely livid about it. And out of the thousands of people that engaged with that tweet and were angry about it, I wrote.
What made you think that he wasn't?
I wrote 2,000 words on it.
That he wasn't a wide receiver 1.
I wrote 2,000 words on it. I have a 2,000 word article that backs up all of it.
Give me the Reader's Digest Kluge version of it.
The Reader's Digest version is that I think that Tyler Lockett had stepped into a much bigger role than people had realized. People still looked at Tyler Lockett as a downfield burner, but after the retirement of Doug Baldwin, Tyler Lockett's ADOT dropped, his first downs went up, his targets went up, and he took on that safety valve role for Russell Wilson. I mean, he he out-targeted DK Metcalf in 2020. So going into this season, I mean, we know the skills that DK Metcalf possesses, but on 80% of his routes, he was running goes or slants. He wasn't developing a diverse route tree, and teams found a way to cap him off in the second half of the season. When they asked DK Metcalf about that in an interview, he said, our game plan was run, go deep. And eventually they started double teaming me. They took away that deep ball and I couldn't get going. So I connected the dots there and I said, we saw DK Metcalf in the first half of the season absolutely go ballistic. And then in the second half of the season, when he became the focal point of the defenses, they slowed him down. I think Tyler Lockett is the guy here that's going to, get the majority of the targets and the majority of the looks. And it's going to be really tough to decide who is going to have a big week in and week out. And sure enough, both of these guys
especially with a run first offense.
Exactly. And I talked about that as well. Pace of play, run first.
I had almost no DK Metcalf at ADP last year, and I've got none so far this year. And it's not because I don't like the player, but and I'm going to say that based on what I don't ask things. I'm not a gotcha kind of guy. I asked you because I really wanted to know what it was, and I wanted to see, because anyone can say, "Hey, I am really good." This view of me is incorrect. It's another, and you were right. You asked a very good question. Well, have you ever watched any of my stuff? And I'm like, no. So I did want to give you a chance to not impress me, but I wanted to see. And I agree that what you just laid out is as good as what anybody, except for maybe the really ridiculous guys, right? But for a guy who is just, that was above average explanation for anybody and I've had some really good people on this show, from Evan Silva all the way TJ Hernandez, tons of people with great, Chris Raybon, great credibility. And that's as good of an answer as I could have gotten out of any of them.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that, Todd. But to get back to kind of where I was at here, I wrote this article and I knew this article was going to come out later in the week. And I'm conscious of what I'm doing here. I know that, DK Metcalf is everybody's guy that everybody was in love with last offseason. So 2 days before my article came out, I tweet DK Metcalf is a boomer bust wide receiver 2. People get up in arms in it. And then I release my article. And then a couple days later, I talk about it on my shows. And, the people that follow me closely and consume my content, they love my analysis. But from people on the outside that don't know me, they just see that and they say, "Oh, this guy's going for clickbait. He doesn't know what he's talking about.
This buffoon is just clickbaiting us again."
Exactly.
And the funny thing is, it's a little bit of both.
Yeah.
right?
I mean, I know what I'm doing.
It's a little bit of both, but you're doing what the people who would dismiss you think you're doing,
Mhm.
but there's more to it. Like, if someone, and I see why your attitude is, well, if someone wants to write me off, let them.
Right. And that's kind of how I feel. And a lot of people have written me off, and maybe at some point I can win them over, like I think I may have with you with our discussion a couple weeks
Absolutely, you
ago.
have.
But I mean, let's just be honest here. I mean, I didn't want to be on Twitter for years. I was publishing my stuff on Fantasy Pros, and I was doing stuff on Reddit, and I was doing it anonymously. And I kind of look at Twitter as almost a necessary evil. Like, if you want to grow in this industry, you almost need to be on Twitter. And isn't the whole point of Twitter to get engagement? I mean,
Well, that's the
at
funny
some
thing.
point, you need to grow.
I mean, but it's like anything else. It's what you're willing to do to get what you want, right?
Right.
And I think that people look at certain things as more engagement farming than than meat, right?
Now,
Uh,
when I think of engagement farming, and first of all, I think that has kind of a negative connotation. I think that it's used to dismiss and discredit people that know how to work Twitter. But when I think of engagement farming, that's when I think about the people tweeting out, "What's your favorite color?" or "Retweet this for me so I can get more exposure," or "What's your favorite condiment to put on French fries?" I look at that as engagement farming. What I do is my stuff might come off as engagement farming because I know the cadence that Twitter wants and I know how to say things that will get people to interact with me. But all of my takes, I believe, are very well founded. And the other thing is, the tweets that I take out are typically tweets that are against the grain. I don't see the point of tweeting out a vanilla take. I mean, you don't need somebody to tell you that Jonathan Taylor should be the 101 in best ball or that Cooper Cup should be the wide receiver one off the board. People know that. So when I'm going through my analysis and I'm going through my process, I find things that I purposely know are against the grain as a way to kind of challenge the hive mind a little bit. And last season I had Debo Samuel ranked ahead of Brandon Ayuk, and I knew that that was an unpopular opinion, so I consistently
not for
talked about
me.
it. Well, you're a smart guy then, Todd, and I was the same way.
I had Debo was my most owned player last year.
Well, congratulations. So you and I probably see the game a lot more similarly than you realize, and
Than
I
we
saw
would
that
think.
too. I said, Brandon Ayuk, I just couldn't get into him at his ADP at all. I had Debo Samuel ahead of him, and I can't tell you how many. Anytime I talk about it, people would say, "Oh, this is clickbait garbage. How can you do this? Did you see what Brandon Ayuk did last year? You're a clown. You're an idiot." And I stood firm in my take
I
because
may be
I
an
believed in it.
idiot, but not for this.
Exactly. And I've made mistakes. I can go through, I also faded Jonathan Taylor, and that was a terrible call, and I'll own that. I thought
I
that,
faded Cooper Cup.
and that's the thing, we all go slightly against the grain. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But if I went through every one of my hot takes last year, things that were against the grain, I'd be very confident that I was batting over 500. I hit on a lot of very big calls, and what people remember are, fading Jonathan Taylor or fading Derrick Henry. What people don't remember is that I faded Derrick Henry because the history and the risk of injury after the amount of touches and yards that he rushed for was sky high. Almost nobody that had 400 carries or 2,000 yards had a fully healthy season the next year. And that was why I faded Derrick Henry. And of course, week 5, week 6, my replies are blowing up with, "Oh, you idiot. I remember you fading Derrick Henry." But I like to think that I had kind of a sound reasoning for fading Derrick Henry. And by the end of the season, it turned out to be right.
And that's all that matters.
Right.
All that matters is, look, I remember having a conversation with one of my DFS guys, when I didn't know anything about it. And we were talking, and I just said, look, ultimately, I'm the one who pushes on the lineup,
Mhm.
right? Don't worry about giving me bad advice, good advice. Oh, just give me your advice. It's my job to parse it, right? And to make the final call. And the only time I ever really get mad at myself is when someone talks me out of something I believe, and and I was right,
Yep.
or I give up and try what someone else wants, and then he fails for the exact reason I was fading him.
Hmm.
So,
There isn't a much worse feeling than that. Having somebody change your opinion and then it bites you in the butt, and you're like, I should have just listened to my gut.
right, that's the worst.
Yes.
That is I would rather lose with my analysis and my take than win with somebody else. And that doesn't mean, and that's the hardest part of fantasy football. The hardest part of fantasy football is to allow yourself to be changed,
Mhm.
but for the right reasons. And it takes a lot of mental discipline to see the difference between being pushed and being convinced.
Mhm.
Um, on a more positive note, you are married to the lovely and seemingly very, very talented Emily Kluge. You guys are so cute together. You did talk a little bit about when you met, but when did you know she was the one?
Oh man, this is gonna sound as corny as possible, but
I would expect nothing less from you two. So I want the corny.
we
Give
knew
me
it.
the corny.
We knew it right off the bat. Our
You
story.
two are kind of cheese balls.
I'd say that. Yeah, I'd agree with you
I'm
there.
I'm not, and I don't mean that negatively. You
Yeah,
know, I'm kind of a cheese ball too, just a closet one.
and I think what is great about us is we have so many similarities and also so many differences. We're just such a great balance with each other. But we met on Tinder of all places. Living in Chicago, and Tinder has a reputation. It's not necessarily somewhere you go to find love. It's somewhere where you go to find somebody. So we ended up
To
matching on
find
Tinder.
love.
Right. Within hours after matching, it was kind of fateful. I was at the dog park with my dog. She was working on the same block as the dog park and got cut from work early. And I said, "Hey, why don't you just come over?" So within hours of us meeting, we met at the dog park, and it was just instantaneous. I mean, we both knew it. So we met on May 22nd. My lease ended on May 31st, so less than 2 weeks. And while my lease was ending, I said, "Hey, I know this sounds crazy. We just met each other a week and a half ago, but let's move in together." And we moved in together. We knew right off the bat that, we were the
It
ones
was
for each
it.
other. Yeah. And I talked about it earlier in the show, but I grew up in many broken homes, moving around a lot, and I always had a pretty strong stance against marriage. And I said, made that very clear with Emily right off the bat. I said, we can live together, we can share our lives together, we can do all of this, but marriage isn't something I'm interested in. Fast forward 5 years and a move out to Colorado, and countless great memories together. And I was very happy to get married.
You got over your fear,
Mhm.
right? You had a rational fear based on your life experience.
Yep.
And it just took time for that part of you that had been hurt to be comforted enough that you could trust going out on the limb and doing it yourself.
Yep.
And that's a beautiful thing.
And then
So,
wouldn't you know, we got engaged in 2019. We had
did
a
she
wedding
know what was
planned.
coming?
She did. We actually went
Okay.
out and designed the ring together.
Okay.
We melted the gold
So
and
that
poured it
picture
into a
she
casting
shared of
machine.
you in the mountains, that was kind of a formality.
No, that was actually me being an extreme romantic, as a matter of fact. Are you talking about the one where I engaged, or where I proposed to her, that picture?
Mhm.
Yep. So we were driving, and that's taken just about 2 miles away from where we live in Colorado. But I had the ring, and we had designed the ring together. We knew it was coming at some point, but she did not expect it at this day at all. We were just driving, and there was a beautiful sunset, and I pulled over and I said, "Hey, I like photography," so I said, "Let me set up my camera on this tripod here and see if I can get a good picture of the sunset." And I said, "Why don't you stand over there a little bit so I can work on the focus?" And then while she was standing there, that's when I walked up, and then I had a remote clicker for the camera, and I dropped down on a knee. And while I proposed to her, I snapped a couple pictures. So completely unexpected, actually. I mean, she knew it was coming eventually, but I
That's
like to think
awesome.
that I did a
No,
good
you
job
made
with
it
the
special.
proposal.
You
Yeah,
made it
I like
very
to think
special.
so.
Um, how do you stay so thin with all those pies?
The mountains. I mean, that's when I lived in Chicago, I worked at a gym. I'd go to the gym all the time, and I'd lift weights and run on the lakefront and do all that. And now living in Colorado, we get whitewater rafting, we get rock climbing, mountain climbing. And that's really our big thing, is climbing mountains. And we've got our list. There are 58 mountains in Colorado that are over 14,000 feet. And we are on a mission to climb all of them. We're over 50% of the way through right now, hoping that we can knock it out within the next 2 years.
That's awesome. What's your favorite cake?
Pie?
A pie, sorry.
Yeah, my favorite
Because the
pie.
hills have pies.
Hills have
And
pies,
I
yes.
and I thought that was such a good name.
It's good. Yeah, she's really good
That
with
is
the
such a
puns.
good name.
She does a great job. But believe it
Because
or
she
not,
has a full-time job in sales, right?
she does, yeah. And then she does this. So the farmers markets during the summer, and then she mails some as well. So there's one that I almost feel guilty saying this because she doesn't sell it because it's really hard to transport. But she makes this banana cream pie, and she makes the cookie crust out of she developed this crust herself, and she uses Nilla wafers and then some binding agencies. But it's this thick cookie crust across the bottom with just this delicious banana cream. And I was never coconut cream pie, banana cream pie. That really wasn't for me. She
Me
makes
either,
pie.
but if you get a really good one,
Oh my goodness, man! This is just it's like nothing I've ever eaten before. Just perfect.
is there one that you wish you never had to look at again?
No. And that's the thing. I mean, growing up, hated banana cream pie. I hated cherry pie, and she has made me like those pies because she does them so well. So her trick with the cherry pies, and I hope she doesn't get mad at me for sharing industry secrets here, but she does a mix of sweet and sour cherries, and then she uses a maraschino liqueur inside there as well that cooks down and gives it a really nice flavor. So I've never liked cherry pie. I was disgusted by cherry pie. She made it. I tried a slice, and it just blew my socks off. It was so good.
That's awesome. All right. So enough about the wonderful Emily Kluge, and how much do you personally play? What stakes do you play, and where do you tend to play?
So I prefer Sleeper as of recently. I was an ESPN guy for a long time. Sleeper is my preferred now, and I've still got my home league that's on ESPN. Total though, I am in 12 total dynasty
Wow.
leagues, and those are all minimum $50, upwards of $250. I've got my two home leagues that I play in with my buddies. One is a keeper league, one is complete redraft. One of them has been going for 13 years, the other's been going for 8 years. Those are well, but one is 200, one is $300. And then last year was the first year that I got into best ball, and whew, that was a lot of fun. Almost exclusively did it on underdog. And I wasn't going high
How
stakes.
is your pass through rate in
I
the
finished.
tournament?
Yeah, so I didn't do any tournaments. What I
Okay,
did was, this was my first year
just
doing
just
it,
the
so I
standard. Yes, yeah,
yeah.
nothing wrong with that.
So what I did was I wanted to learn how to do it because I'd never played best ball before. So I want to say it was between 4 and 500 leagues, and all of them were between 5 and $10. I didn't want anything super high stakes, and I
There's
would do
nothing wrong
some.
with that.
Right, and I was trying to learn, and when I first came onto the scene as a fantasy football guy, I was all about zero run or zero wide receiver. Wait for your wide receivers, and I realized in best ball that is not the way that you want to go at
Not in
all.
a, especially not. Yeah, no.
Oh my god, my 0 wide receiver teams were I was just burning money on those. I don't think I won on a single, one of those. So, after kinda going through all these different rosters, looking at the ones that won, looking at the ones that worked, I've really changed my style in best ball heading into this season, and I am I maybe like to get 1 running back within the first, 4 or 5 rounds, but really, I'm not even thinking about taking running backs early. I want to get an elite tight end, and I want to get some good wide receivers because that seemed to be the recipe last year that worked pretty well for me.
Um, I'll give you one. I'll give you one of my suggestions. I've done between 400 best balls a year for 5 6 years now, and
Mhm.
I've extensively studied it. And the key with running backs is to understand that wide receivers are going to outscore them in general from an ADP perspective all the way through the draft.
Right.
So when I tend to look to take running backs, is often I will take at least one early, sometimes two. But what I'm looking for is when I look at the running back and the wide receiver, is it really close?
All right.
Right? Like, can I tell myself a story that this running back could outscore this wide receiver or be even? If that's the case, then that's a good tie break to take a running back because what you're trying to do is you can make up because what, and then to know in a draft, like right now, there's this level of running backs in the 8th to 10th round that
Oh
I
my
just
gosh.
love.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
can't get enough of them.
Hmm.
Rashad Penny, Miles Sanders, Isaiah Spiller.
Yep.
I mean, Kenneth Walker. And there's almost like no wide receivers I like. And
Hmm.
then from round 10 to 15, it's all these wide receivers that I like more than the running backs. So to me, it's all about playing the draft board. And as the season goes, ADP changes, the opportunities change. You're in sales, when you've got a product that people like, right? And when value changes.
Hmm.
And taking advantage of those shifts and getting people at a discount. Anyway,
And that, like I
that's
said,
it.
I last year I faded Jonathan Taylor very foolishly, but you probably remember there was that 1 week period where Quentin Nelson was injured and Carson Wentz was injured, and sure enough, Jonathan Taylor started to fall, and I said, "Well, this is my chance." I didn't want any Jonathan Taylor, but now I can draft him at an extreme discount, and I drafted Jonathan Taylor on every league for those 2 weeks there. So yeah, I think
Mhm.
it's all about just finding values as they change and capitalizing on the changing value throughout the offseason.
And then with best ball, it's very important to mix up your exposure because unlike a season long league where you can pick up,
Yeah.
and unlike a DFS where it's 1 week and the chance of injury is small, especially early. I did a pod for FFPC yesterday that just went live, and I explained in the first 2 rounds, you see, in these tournaments, you see advance rates as low as an average advance rate 17%. You see Calvin Ridley had a 4% advance rate. That's 77% off, and he was drafted right next to Jonathan Taylor.
Yep.
Now, if you had looked at a draft board and let's say you liked Calvin Ridley a lot more than Jonathan Taylor, the chance of injury early is not nearly as much as whatever it is you think you like or don't like
Mhm.
about one guy over another,
Yeah.
right? That's my
And mine wasn't second round, but I learned that my most rostered player last year with I hate to even say it, 45% exposure on Chris Carson last year. I just couldn't figure out why Chris Carson was getting drafted in the late third, early fourth. I took him in 45% of my drafts, and
I think I
you
had
can
3%.
I'm a big Chris
And
Carson fan,
I
but I
did
learned from
very
it.
good. I did very good last year with my fades, except for Cooper Cup and Leonard Fournette, and Cup, and both of them are ones that I kick myself because it was like Chris Carson. I had a very good reason. He was constantly banged up,
Yep.
constantly. I don't worry about major injuries; those are flukes. But a guy who's constantly missing 3 to 5 games, and he plays with such an aggressive style. And I thought I liked Rashad Penny. I thought Penny was going to come back, and I thought they've always shown that they split the work between them a certain amount.
Right.
So I didn't have much Carson. I lost my other train of thought though. So and the but the Lenny, back to Lenny.
Mhm.
Cup, what made me mad about myself after the fact was I liked the Matt Stafford move.
Mhm.
I liked that McVay was a good coach for offense, and I had almost no Woods and no Cup. I thought they were going too high. That was short-sighted because one of them was bound to hit
Right.
with Matt Stafford. One of them was bound to hit. Leonard Fournette was another one where I think in general you do very well by avoiding three-way committees.
Mhm.
But his ADP was so late, and he had, and if anyone was going to break away from the other two, it was going to be him.
Yeah.
So that's why I kicked myself on those two.
I got a little bit lucky with Cup. Cup was a guy that I was targeting very heavily last year, and my reason for that is, I think that Sean McVay is a very smart coach, and I thought that Robert Woods' usage was amplified to cover up some of the not so great characteristics of Jared Goff. So when Matthew Stafford came in and has a
That's
cannon
a
of an
great
arm,
point.
I thought that it would make more sense that they'd stop manufacturing touches for Woods and they would let Cup do his thing all over the field. And, every once in a
With
while you
me,
get
with
lucky and
Cup,
you
it was
strike
the
gold.
coming off back-to-back injuries,
Mhm.
but I overdid it. I overdid it
Yeah,
or
we we
underdid it.
we we talked about my hometown redraft league that's been going 13 years running, and boy did I get lucky in the 5th and 6th round getting Deebo Samuel and Cooper Cup back to back in redraft. That made for a fun season.
I bet it did. Hold on a second. I'm going to answer. Didn't get much questions today, but I got this one from Jose. Curious to know any running back and/or wide receiver you both like near the end of best ball drafts, round 16 to 20. I'll go first, Dave. Wide receiver, I love Bernard Berrios. I think he proved that he's for real. Um, he's asking for $9 million. I think that Bernard Berrios has broken through and in that Wes Welker mode. I
Mhm.
don't know that he'll get that kind of usage, but these quick guys who are impossible to cover, once teams finally give them a chance and they prove themselves, they tend to continue to do really well. As for a running back, I'm going to throw out a guy who probably won't have a lot of draft capital, and one that proved what he can do. I think Deonta Forman is going way, way,
Oh,
way too late. I
love
think
him.
he, I think he showed that he can carry the load, and he's going in the 18th, 19th, 20th round of drafts. And the rookie that I like really late is Pierre Strong. I loved his tape. There's not a lot of it, but I really liked his tape. Dave, throw out a couple names late.
Well, I do just want to say, Deonta Foreman, whether it's dynasty, best ball, redraft, he is one of my favorite targets this offseason. I mean, the guy just he looked phenomenal last year, and I've been a fan of him since he got drafted. He people I think are quick to forget the pedigree that he had coming into the league, and it was derailed by injuries. But I mean, he has the makings to be a premier back. So I love Deonta Foreman. And after just talking about Chris Carson, he's getting drafted right now in the 15th, 16th round. So I may have made a mistake last year taking him in the 3rd and 4th, but where he's going right now, there's obviously concern with his injury, but the upside is so hard to ignore. Chris Carson's a guy that I like taking, and another guy that I like taking is Isaiah McKenzie. A name
Mm.
that probably isn't getting a lot of looks, but man, towards the end of the season, they started using him in a really versatile role in Buffalo. So he's somebody that I've really been trying to grab wherever I can as well. I feel like it's so corny to say like, oh, used like Deebo Samuel. But if there was one guy that was used like Deebo Samuel at the end of the year, it was Isaiah McKenzie on an explosive offense. So Chris Carson and Isaiah McKenzie are the two guys that I'm typically looking at in those rounds.
I've got so far 34% Berrios and 23% Mckenzie.
Like it. And I
In
love
my,
Barrios too.
I just like you. I love these guys who have shown they can do it, but they just haven't, gotten a full ride yet.
Hmm.
And I think that both Buffalo and the Giants are going to have interest in McKenzie. I think
Yeah.
Brian Dable will have interest, and I think Buffalo is going to have interest in re-signing him.
Yep. So those are two guys. And it feels weird getting back on Chris Carson after he burned me so bad last year. But where he's getting drafted now in the 15th round, I don't know if there's a guy getting drafted there that has the same really easy to see upside that Chris Carson does.
Now Twitter has seen me devour a Tootsie Pop on live TV. It was not pretty. Um, um, Sorry about that to the human race. But I think not Jared, Matt Schauf from Draft Sharks, who I've had on the show a lot recently. He loves Carson late.
Yeah. Matt Schauf's a great guy. I had him and Jordan Rains on my show in the off season, did some IDP talk, and he's a really good guy.
Worst decision ever.
Tootsie Pop. I love drinking carbonated water, LaCroix and things like that. I drink them all the time. I quickly learned that those don't work when you're doing podcasts because I just end up belching into my microphone for the entire
Yeah,
hour.
Yeah. I don't know why I just wanted that Tootsie Pop. I've never done that before during a show. I figured this was, a kind, it's not like some heavy teaching show. It's kind of a backyard barbecue kind of chat,
Right.
and that I would have my Tootsie Pop. And all right. Well, I think that is going to do it for me. I really enjoyed this. You have any questions for me before we go?
No, I'm just really thankful that you took the time to get to know me. As corny as that sounds, it's so easy to have a preconceived notion on somebody because you see what you want to, and you really can make your own interpretation of who somebody is. So I appreciate you, having a gut reaction to who you thought I was, and then taking the time to get to know me. And look at us now. I had a great conversation, a lot of fun on this podcast, and I'm glad that we got to do this, Todd.
Me too. Jose is asking, what's the name of your podcast?
So I have two. There's only one that's going right now, and that is the Launchpad, which you can find youtube.com/football guys. We got an episode coming out tomorrow with Kyle Yates of no longer Fantasy Pros. He's is now the Fantasy Playbook, and Alfredo Brown at the Pretend GM. So that'll come out tomorrow. And then I've also got the Mailbag Show on the Football Guys Network, which we're doing an episode in 2 weeks to kind of break down some hopeful free agency news. We'll do another episode for the NFL draft in April, but that'll be full go again at the end of May.
Awesome. All right. And at Dave Kluge
Kluge. Yep.
On Twitter.
Yep.
And I am also very glad that we got a chance to talk and that you got to show some of your chops. And I wish you the best going forward.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Todd. I appreciate this.
All right, that's going to do it, guys. I again want to thank my friends over at the FFPC. I can't wait for the $1 million main event. I've already signed up for 2 teams. Go to myffpc.com and get $25 on your first team with the code BESTBALL. Get it? Best ball. Me. Best ball. All right, that's going to do it, folks.